Good evening to everyone. My name is Sonia Diaz. I'm the current president of HPRA. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our first HPRA National Programming Session of the year. While we give everybody a chance to get on, I want to encourage you to look in the chat and fill out our HPRA programming survey. It only takes 1 minute. It gives us a better sense of what sorts of topics you want HPRA to provide programming around. So you can also stay up to date with our latest job postings and upcoming programming by following us on our LinkedIn page, or you can join us on our LinkedIn group. And if you have any questions about how to join HPRA or want to inquire on how to submit a job posting, email us at info@hprausa.org. All of this information will be in the chat for you to access. So, okay, let's get started. So we're excited to be kicking off our 2021 programming series with a topic that I think we could all agree has been causing quite a bit of discussion and debate over the past couple of years, which is the term Latinx. As I'm sure many of you can relate, the question around the use of the term Latinx is one that continuously comes up within our organizations and from our own clients, depending, I guess, on what side you work on, right? So while there are many arguments for and against using Latinx, we found that what has truly been missing is a true understanding of its roots. So depending on who you ask, you'll get various answers for the why of Latinx. Why does it exist? Which is why at HPRA, we thought it was important to bring together a diverse group of thought leaders in the multicultural media space to talk about those cultural, regional, and generational divides that are driving these conversations. So when I was thinking about what this group would look like, I really couldn't think of anyone better to lead this conversation than Julio Ricardo Varela. And I know Julio doesn't like long bios, but—
No, I don't.
But I think he's worth introducing. For those of you who don't know Mr. Varela, he's the founder of Latino Rebels, arguably the most visited news site solely dedicated to addressing Latino issues in the country. He founded it in 2011, so this year they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary. And it was created with the intention of raising awareness in a meaningful way around the political, social, and economic issues Latinos are facing in their communities. The success of the platform has led Latino Rebels to join the Futuro Media family in 2018, which is a successful Latina-led and owned media company, which is headed by iconic journalist Maria Hinojosa, who, by the way, is also being bestowed with our Journalist of the Year award at this year's Bravo Awards in New York City on September 15th. So mark your calendars for that. His career track includes working as a digital producer for Al Jazeera America's The Stream, and his work has been featured in many global outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, the Guardian, ESPN, and on and on and on. He also graduated cum laude at Harvard College. And over the past few years, he's been extensively covering the political fallout stemming from the natural disasters and financial collapse in Puerto Rico, giving them the attention stateside that they were lacking in mainstream media. And of course, he has discussed quite frequently the rise of the term Latinx. I think it's safe to say that Julio is a source of pride, not only for our community, but for journalism as a whole. I'm proud to call him a colleague and a friend, and I'm very thankful for making himself available today to host this program. So without further ado, I turn tonight's conversation, the X Factor, over to our moderator, Mr. Julio Ricardo Varela.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Just a couple of things that I need to share because this is what life in remote world is. So I had to get my car fixed today, and I got a big bill for the dealer. I'm up in Boston. The allergies are ridiculous. I sat in my patio with the pollen and I forgot to realize that pollen sticks on your clothes. So I had to, before this, I had to be like, oh, I have to make sure. So I'm suffering it's just allergies. And then my computer crashed about 15 minutes ago. And so I'm running this off a phone with the light. But I was like, we have to talk about Latinx, and so I really appreciate Sonia, the invite. And basically, what we want to do here is not necessarily do a panel. I kind of feel like if we were at a table with food and libations, we could have this conversation. So what I want to do is actually have each of the speakers introduce themselves, say a couple of things about them, and just have fun. And we will take questions and answers. We will take chats. We will take I don't know, Venmo request if we wanted to. No, if you really like it, but just, tweet us out, and we're here, and, we're chilling for, for an hour. And if we have to take it a little bit longer, and if people can stick around, we're more than happy to help. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go by the Zoom order of appearance. So, and the first person to my right is Carla Santiago. Carla, can you say hi, introduce yourselves, and say hello?
Hello. Hello, Julio. Hello, esteemed panelists. Hello, everybody out there. My name is Carla Santiago, and I am the proud general manager of Edelman's Miami office. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico is something that I always have to lay first out there, as it is one of the key pillars of who I am.
Yes.
Yes, right? So I've built my entire career working on the Hispanic marketing side. I am a brand marketing, brand communications executive. I have worked at the largest PR agencies in the world, including Edelman, of course, and others. I'm an Edelman boomerang. I actually started my career at Edelman, New York, working on the U.S. Hispanic team for Unilever. And then I went on to do the same work at another agency for Pantene and CoverGirl. And then I went on to travel a beautiful world out in Latin America. I was the head of public relations for Hyatt Hotels Corporation Latin America for 3 years. I lived on a plane. I lived in hotels. And now I live in between my beautiful home in Pembroke Pines, Florida, and my beautiful home in San Juan, Puerto Rico. So it is a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited to discuss this very interesting theme topic that I always call to be or not to be Latinx.
All right, Carla, thank you so much. Let me turn it over to Danny. Daniel, I'm not your mother, so I can't call you Daniel. So why don't you say hi to everyone and what you do?
Thanks, Julio. And apologies, I had technical issues. This is what happens when a family uses Zoom for distance learning. They tend to creep into your Zoom, so apologies for that. So I'm Danny Marin, or Daniel Marin. I am born and raised from Miami, and actually just returning to my native city after 5 years living in Los Angeles and Seattle. I currently oversee all publicity and PR for Amazon Prime Video Latin America, and more recently with a focus on US Hispanics. So this was definitely a discussion of great interest to me, as it's something that I'm really trying to dive deeper on. My past is pretty much all PR. I've worked on the agency side with some of the smaller public affairs focused firms here in South Florida, but also with major firms like Burson Marsteller. I know that's not the name anymore, but still. And then in terms of industry exposure, I really run a pretty wide gamut with a focus in Latin America, representing multinationals, having worked in logistics for UPS. Also did professional services for one of the largest law firms in the world called Baker McKenzie. And then my most recent foray into entertainment, where a stint at Netflix, and then have been at Amazon for the past 4 years, just really building out their PR narrative for our entertainment division in Latin America. So yeah, really excited to be here. I'm very honored to be invited in among you folks. Really interested to the insights that come out of this.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you so much. All right, next on my Zoom screen is Federico. Why don't you say hello?
Hola, buenas tardes, buenas noches. This is Federico Subervi Vélez, también from San Germán, Puerto Rico. I always say that it's part of who.
Right. So wait a minute. There's 3 out of 5. Oh, okay. We're everywhere. Sorry. Okay. Continue, Federico.
That's true. And it's part of, as Carla said, it's part of who and what I am. As being Puerto Riqueña is part of who and what she is. It forms you to love a beautiful place and the families and the culture, and that's what we carry with us and we share when we can. And this is a moment to share our opinions. And I've been sharing my opinions as an academic I did for 32 years at different universities, having studied at Wisconsin, direct from Puerto Rico to Wisconsin, then California, Santa Barbara, and then to Texas at Austin. And then it was 1 year in New York where I met some wonderful folks at the Edelman. I made wonderful connections, really nice people. I love that. That was a important part of my being in New York, those connections. And then I came back, and at Texas State University, I had the fortune to have Sonia as a star student. And I was
Oh, there's the connection. Very nice.
she was one of my very first semester first students there. And she was just delightful to know, because I think that in our conversations, she geared up to learn a little bit more about what she would have learned from others about Latinos in media. So I continued my academic career at another university in Ohio, at Kent State, and then I retired somewhat to get recruited by, to get a wonderful scholarship at the University of Leeds in the United Kingdom, where I worked on my book, The News Media in Puerto Rico, which just came out in English a little bit at the end of last year. And now it's being translated to Spanish, Los Medios de Comunicación de Puerto Rico, and it'll be out hopefully next year.
I'm putting 2 and 2 together. Someone pitched me the book, so I'm supposed to have that book sent to me. So
Yeah.
we need to connect after this. I'm
We
supposed to
will.
review the book.
Well, it'll be delightful to do so. And sadly, it came out in hardback at a very high price, because that's what the company wanted to get its returns on for its investment in our publishing it. But it'll be coming out in Spanish with possibly a title, no, that's another one. Comunicación Política a lo Boricua. That's a different one. That'll also be for next year. In any case, you see, I'm a retired professor who's retired only in terms of salary, but not in terms of academic work and interest and all the things that I continue doing for mi gente, and also working to get a diaspora multimedia platform for the Puerto Rican community in Florida and elsewhere that might be coming out sometime next year.
Congratulations. All right. That's great.
And here I am, because we all have different points of views about the use of different terms, and I'll share a little bit of a story about
I got you. Like, so we're going to share the story in a second, but we'll take it from there. But first of all, I have to introduce, can I call you my brother from another mother? Is that okay? At a panel?
That's fine.
I mean, I'm totally doing I have to be transparent. The fabulous Cesar Vargas, who I have known since, I don't know, the aughts. So Cesar, take it away. Say hi.
Hola, soy Cesar Vargas. It's been like, I think we know each other for like 10 years, I think, maybe more, I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm a writer, cultural critic, and I've worked in so many different industries, which it's insane for me. I don't know, you guys probably have read some of my work. I've written about, mostly about the Latinx, Hispanic community and what we go through within the United States, even though I was like born in the Dominican Republic and I came when I was 13 years old to Brooklyn. So yeah, I've worked I do PR and marketing as well. I've worked with like major agencies and businesses and corporations, as well as indie artists and well-established artists. Besides that, I'm mostly known for my writing. I'm not the lawyer, Cesar Vargas, which a lot of people confuse me for, who has a bigger profile than me. He's the advocate from New York City, a well-known dreamer. I think he just attained his papers, something like that.
Yeah, he's running for
Long Island,
like Staten Island, like something. The president of the borough president of Staten Island. You're not that person.
Yeah. We because we both get in the media all the time. I'm mostly, I've written for Latino Rebels. Thank you for, I gotta give you credit, for because you've given me a lot of exposure, even when it comes to within how can I say this, within discourse, within American discourse, the community. It reaches Latino Rebels, reaches not just the Latinx community, reaches like people that want to know about the Latinx community.
Yeah.
But I've written for like NBC, even Fox News Latino when it used to be on, with the Huffington Post, The Hill, which took some of my work. For different, Sky News, I've been quoted in the Salon and so many different papers. For my words, they tend to be very polemic. It's not, even though I do appreciate and learn and understand where academics are coming from, and I do give them the props and the respect. there's a way that they express themselves that it has to be in the passive voice. I do speak in the, I'm gonna hit you over the head with this, and then you're gonna pay attention to it, and people do listen. So that's why I appreciate their work, and I sort of like translate their work
Yeah.
so the community can understand what they're saying. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So, all
that's
right.
it.
Well, this is what they say. This is a A-list, top-notch panel. I couldn't think of a better way to like talk about Latinx with four fabulous people. So I have my first question to each and every one of you to kind of um, get into this, and we can start with you, Carla. When did you first hear the term Latinx, and what was your reaction?
I first heard the term probably 3 years ago. I can't remember exactly when and where, but it sounds like 3 years ago. And to me, it was initially very shocking. It was very weird sounding. It was extrapolating the beauty of my Spanish language, because I do consider myself a bilingual Spanish
Mm-hmm.
dominant person in
Mm-hmm.
this country. So for me, where I try to speak Spanish all day as much as I can. So like taking out the A's and the O's, and for gender specificities was weird at the beginning. I have now, in the past 3 years, started to take a more open, personal approach to Latinx, and I've obviously educated myself on the terminology, what it represents, what it represents to those that self-identify with the terminology, and the importance of us being inclusive to the entire community,
Right,
and
right.
and the real understanding that we have to see people for who they are and for what they want to be seen as, and there is a beautiful thing in that. And that I think at the point where I am now, and this has been a personal process of 3 years, I'm at a point now where I I use all the terms interchangeably, and that makes me feel more inclusive to everybody and respectful to everybody. So when I do write Hispanic slash Latinx.
All right. So thank you for that answer. Uh, Cesar, when was the first time you heard the term Latinx,
Well,
and what was your reaction?
I think it's probably a lot longer than that, probably 5 to 7 years ago, since I'm
Mm-hmm.
more I navigate different spaces within the Latinx community, and I'm friends with a lot of people, with the LGBTQ community. Yeah, it should. I think about 7 years ago, and my first reaction, I wasn't just like Carla. Carla, I was not a fan of it. I was like pretty. If you've read some of my, I'm always joking around in social media. I used to mock the
You
term.
did. I remember. We got
I used to
receipts.
I
If I could share screens, which I can't
yeah,
share
yeah.
screens.
I used to, because that's one of my, my shticks. One of the things I used to. I was not a fan of it. I was like, what is this? And like a
Mhm.
lot of people today, like, how do you even pronounce it? Like, in Spanish, it's not. I was very protective of the Spanish language, to the point, which I still am to today. But to the point, yeah, that was very aggressive with it. And then, the more you're exposed to people, the more you learn about certain communities, you see that, I'm 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 being the person that I'm complaining about. That's how I saw it. I don't know how
Mm.
other people see it. I'm being, when Americans say, why do you call yourself Latinx or Hispanic or Latino? Uh, and why don't you just call yourself American? Because we're all Americans. That's how I saw it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm this person. I'm this person, that the all lives matter person. I don't want to be that person. And then eventually, I started. That's like original. The first reaction you get is you get angry. You sort of like fall back, and that's like sort of like cognitive dissonance. Like that's something it's your whole identity is being challenged. And
Right.
then if you one of the things that I tell people is just let it flow through you, and then eventually just learn about certain things, and you learn to embrace it. I do use, like Carlos I was saying earlier, I do use Hispanic interchangeably, and Latino as well. So I do use Latinx, Hispanic, and Latino when it comes to the Latino. I call myself Latino. I don't call myself Latinx because I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
non-binary or
Okay, that's good. I'm glad this is just like the foundational question. I love the fact that you guys already have hot takes because everyone has to like defend it. You're like, I just want to go on record to say this is what I used to do and this is how I feel about it now. So it's so funny how we're already like trying to defend the use or not defending the use. Already like I've prepared a statement about Latinx. So Danny, with that said, when was the first time you heard it and what was your reaction?
Yeah, for me, it was that 2-year timeline actually, and the
Interesting.
that I was living on the West Coast, where conversations about identity, things are much more in your face there, and these types of conversations about representation, inclusion, and stuff, they're very much day to day. It's not to say East and West are that starkly different, but I just found it to be something that was much more ever present in a lot of the dialogues going on. The first time I heard it, it was just more of a reaction like, okay, now there's this, like, oh, okay, naturally, just because the evolution that you would see in the way that people were referring to each other to make sure that, there was an agenda of inclusion and inclusivity, in the way that you spoke. It almost seemed like a natural progression. U.S. Hispanic is something I grew up with. Latino is something that I would use to identify myself as well. And hearing this, it wasn't exactly a no-brainer. It didn't give me that shock value because I always thought, well, this is probably where it needed to go anyway, just so that it is much more rounded in terms of who it invites into that demographic. But diving a little bit further and seeing other people's reactions, it did actually make me, aware that, well, this isn't universal. At one point, you really have to be honest that it comes down to the individual. Generalizations just unfortunately do not work at any scale. And this was just another example of that, where I think generationally speaking, or where, you sit in your own identity, you'll have to find a certain degree of comfort, or we might be having the same conversation about the next term in 10 years.
Yeah. All right, Professor, I'm going to put you on the spot. When was the first time you heard this term? And I'm going to make a prediction. Okay. I'm going to make a prediction. First time I heard this term for me was in 2011. Did you hear it before or after that? Because I would think you might have heard it before.
The prediction for me is that I can't remember when I heard it for the first time.
Right. Like I would think because can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, some academic used it, someone else didn't use it, someone in some academic article, some newspaper article, whatever. And personally, I don't incorporate it. I don't use it. If I'm writing, I'm not going to use it. If my editor for whatever journal, magazine, article wants to use it, that's fine with me. That's my flexibility on the matter. Because this question takes me back to many years ago. I was giving a talk at some college, and it was the students, young kids, just straight into college for second year. And I gave my talk about Latinos and media, because that's the term that I've been using, Latino, Latin American. And then I point out, look, it's a personal preference. Then I give a long list of reasons why different people use different terms: Mexicano, Mexicoamericano, Tejano, Latino, Hispano, Hispanic, whatever it is, and it's a matter of person. No, professor, you have to choose. I said, no, excuse me, I'm not going to choose. It's circumstantial. Which terms we use is always circumstantial to the environment in which we're in. So I will not use the term that for my comfort level is not appropriate for me, but if it is required by an editor or a publisher or the environment in which I'm in, I have to be flexible. That said, let's understand that we're changing a language that is centuries old, but the language has always changed over the centuries. And this may be a moment of transition of a few words. Do we want to do it? Is it going to be acceptable? Time will tell, because there may be other terms. We may have the Latinx, but look, someone in some conversation not too long ago was saying, well, instead of the X, put an E. So it'll be all with
Latine, yeah.
Yeah, and the French have it that way. And then someone mentioned some other language. We'll have to make decisions if we really want to degender every single word. Instead of la mesa, le mes. Instead of el cartero, la persona que trae las cartas. Oh, it's not las cartas, la persona que trae. Oh, you know, it goes on, and we'll have to make some decisions that will be standardized for the sake of keeping nuestro español. Otherwise, it'll be someone else's language. And,
all
and
right.
the question is it our transition, or is someone else not of our culture
Imposing it.
leading the process to change our language?
Yeah. All right, so this is good. I wanted to ask this first question, and again, we do have some comments from people. We will address them. I see you, Alex Marin. It's a great question about Hispanic that I want to revisit, but I do have a couple other thoughts here. And what I'm going to do here, so that we're not all talking heads, I want to just everyone unmute themselves, and I'm just going to toss out statements, and I want to see if you all agree or disagree, because I think this is part of like one of the things that I want to approach this from a practical perspective. We can get into like a discussion about even the use of Latino or even the use of Hispanic as being imposed, and what does it mean, because those terms get rejected all the time, right? So Latinx is just another term that might get accepted or rejected. But let me ask you this one statement that I want to make sure each and every one of you say something, and you can just say true or false, right? And let's just go with that. So it's important for organizations to just choose one label and stick with it when describing our community. False, right? We all agree with that, right, Danny? We all agree that's false, right? Okay, so we understand that. The term Latinx has been used in political terms in the last 2 years to kind of represent sort of the right-left paradigm of politics, especially in American politics. Would you agree with that statement or not? That it's used by the right wing to kind of say that this is the liberal left imposing this on us politically. No agreement, sir? Have you?
I haven't seen that, so I wouldn't go that
So the reason I say is that
can I
yeah,
say something about
yeah,
that?
because there was a very viral. The reason I
I
bring it up, there's a viral piece in USA Today from a former PR person, Giancarlo Sopo, who then basically said that this is a creation of white liberals to take away Hispanidad. And in the last couple of years, it's become a politicized weapon. So anyone who uses it, not to get into politics here, but it has been something that has been used as saying this is being, this term is being used by white liberals it's what the professor said, to impose on our community. And I just thought that that's a little bit of the pushback as well. Cesar, did you want to say something?
Yeah, there are some similarities between the people who are right wingers and people who are against the term Latinx, and that's what I've seen for the most part. And the ones, I think the people that I'm exposed to and who use it are they wouldn't like to be called liberal. They'll probably be against the term, even being called progressive. I don't think they will embrace. But their identity and their ideals would probably lean left. You know, and yeah, I think from what I've seen, like I was saying earlier, the people who are against it have been spewing some pretty similar right wing talking points. And you know, when you say you're an American, don't call yourself black or Latinx or white. That's what the right wing says to us when we raise certain issues within our community. So it's to an extent, yes. And there are some people who might not embrace the term, and they don't have to necessarily be right.
Got you. So we're going to move on from the positive because I think there's been a backlash. But let me ask you this statement, and so anyone can jump in now. I'm not going to ask for people. This is a generational thing. Most older Latinos abhor the term, and younger Latinos, Latinxes embrace the term, and companies need to figure that out. Is that a true? Do we all agree with that?
I do.
All right, go Carla. Why is that so important?
I mean, because it is important for marketers to understand this, because and Luis Miguel Messianu really said this well in his piece, but we have to segment and group people in order to do our work. We have to work in doing Hispanic communications, Hispanic marketing for general market clients. So in order for people to understand, at least that's what I do for my living, of course. I work in corporate communications and I work with general market clients who hire me to decipher how to approach the US Hispanic market. I have to come at them with a segmentation, with a grouping, with an insight that encompasses this big group that is not really a big group, that is not really a homogeneous group. But that doesn't mean that the term Latinx, that a company, a brand can choose just one term unless your audience is that microscopic and you feel completely comfortable that you are talking to a very Gen Z audience that will be totally cool and cruising with you and Latinx. If you're not that kind of very niche brand, then you can go all the way into that, because if you are a CPG, consumer packaged goods brand, that you want to reach a multi-generational household of a Hispanic family, you can just go all into Latinx. You can't ignore Latinx either. So that's my point on that.
That's, you dropped that mic, Carla. I like it. That's like a Boricua mic. Boom. Danny, do you have any thoughts about this? I mean, I mean, in what you do, I mean, this is exactly, but you know, you work in like Latin America with, you know, major brand like Amazon Prime that, let's be honest, like is probably waking up to all this, right? So what do you do?
So beyond the Amazon piece of it, to Carla's point, I mean, my career has been built on actually providing counsel to multinationals wanting to operate in Latin America in diverse countries. And the base level advice is always, there's no one size fits all approach. I mean, that is just, has to be the starting point. And that's really where I have been able to guide how we adapt communications, looking for points of relevance, and you know, and really trying to just evolve a narrative that really does speak to different individuals in different walks of life and so on. I don't see a difference in the approach to using the terms Hispanic or Latinx or Latino. They do identify with, you know, people at a generational point or, you know, just at a socioeconomic. You know, these things talk to different people, and it's on us as communicators to find what those inroads are so that we're getting this information in the appropriate way to these people that can most benefit from it. Now, that's a pretty blanketed statement, obviously, but you do have to appreciate the fact that individuals want to be spoken to at an individual level.
Exactly.
Really, you know, that's the formula. Now, that sounds expensive. That sounds exhausting. But it is a requirement. It is a requirement for this day and age, especially with a hyper-connected world that want to be spoken to, you know, in that direct individual manner.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And again, we have a question from Alex that it's a really good question I'm going to share after. I just want to make sure the professor or Cesar have, because I do have one more statement I want people to react to. But Professor, what are your thoughts on the generational divide?
Quickly, it's a fact that it's historical, generational, statistical that come together, and then cultural sensitivities. And also one more thing, we have to avoid the hyperbole, the hyperbole, the fact from the fiction. We have to divide it. And I'm going to use one example. The term Hispanic was not invented by the Nixon administration. The term Hispanic existed and has existed, Hispano-Americano, but that's the concept that those young kids at that college presentation that I made were arguing. No, that's an imposed term by the Republicans in the census of whatever it was. And I'm saying, look at the facts of the history and look at the statistics. In certain parts of the country, certain people prefer the term Hispanic, and others, they prefer the term Latino because of cultural characteristics and heritage and whatnot. In New Mexico, it's Latino, Hispano. Not even Hispanic, and it goes on and on. So if we're going to be smart about this, let's go to what Carla said just a moment ago. Understand the characteristics of the different groups and do not, and then, as Daniel said, one size does not fit all. Do not go to Latin America and try to sell the Latinx brand for America Latina, Latinx. It's not gonna work in the same way that for me, my preference is Puerto Riqueño, and it would never be Puerto Riqueñex. That would be horrendous to have that to try to generalize all Puerto Riqueños y Puerto Riqueñas with the Puerto Riqueñex. I mean, it sounds awful to begin with, and it would be wrong because it would take away the history of our identity as Puerto Riqueño or Puerto Riqueña. And that would be whoever imposes that would be really doing a bad job. And I wouldn't buy that product if that were the case.
Okay. All right. I want to say one more thing about this because I do want to, we have some questions. And one of the things that we're seeing in this debate, and I think some of y'all have already mentioned it, is that it's now becoming a debate that's outside of the community. So when you have someone like Bill Maher, who is on a very influential platform on HBO, asking, you know, Alex Padilla, what do you think of the term Latinx? It becomes a conversation that someone who watches Bill Maher, who's not Latino or Puerto Rican, goes, what's this Latinx thing? So how much is it been, and again, I'm just gonna toss it out, whoever wants to jump in. How much do you think it's been sort of like utilized without being thought about, without understanding how it became sort of, you know, the origins came from inclusivity in you know, and it did come from Latin America. Latinx, if people, it actually came from academic circles in Latin America, and the first Google searches were from Mexico, and this is all recorded, like in 2004, 2005, as sort of like a response to identification, sexual identity, you know, being excluded from society. But now it's become something that gets so firmly adapted that people have to jump to it because, like, this is because Elizabeth Warren said it, right, in a video, you know, during a campaign. So how do you, each one of you as professionals, how do you answer that to the non-Latinos out there, right, who are kind of like, oh, I read this New York Times piece and it used like Latinx, or Paola Ramos wrote this great book called Latinx, right? Well, you know, Paola Ramos is Jorge Ramos's daughter, great person, friend of mine. How do you start answering that too? Carla, yeah, Carla was leaning in, so I was like, lean in, Carla.
Oh, well, I mean, it is used without proper understanding every day, all day. Every client that I have will find the articles, just like you said, and will send an email. And the email is like, Carla, I just read this. What do you think about this? This is such an interesting topic. And I have to give my own explanation to this. This happens to me on a monthly basis. Then I have also the client teams within Edelman that are working with me as an integrated team for that client. And they're also trying to learn and understand about Hispanic and multicultural communications. I also have to give them explanations because they get an email from me that in the headline of the email, I can say, earned media strategy for the Hispanic market. And then that's the subject line. And then I start typing the email and I go, because the Latinx, and myself in the same email, I have confused them with two or three interchangeable terms. So I am constantly explaining myself to that point, now after 3 years, I'm now at the hyphenating situation where I do the backslash thing.
That really looks good on paper too, the hyphenation, right? Does anyone else have any thoughts about this? Danny, Cesar, just jump in. I'm not really, whoever feels sort of like the imposition coming from the outside. I would think.
The one point that I would make is, while yes, it might be divisive and so on in the way that thing, you know, like when you have other communities basically starting to take a look. The one thing that I do try to explain is that that's actually not a bad thing. You know, the interest that is being created from these outsider communities, because that can lead to advocacy, that can lead to support and so on. This is coming from somebody that growing up, you know, had a bunch of friends in the Northeast that would always say, oh yeah, that Spanish guy. And it's like, guys, you have no idea how fundamentally wrong that is. And
right.
In Spain, you know, so again, the evolution, I do think, is something that we can at least applaud because it is becoming part of the mainstream, the zeitgeist, if you will, and the interest is definitely there. Now, whether this is subversive, or there's some other agenda, whether it be just to sell better and so on, that's one thing. But to be included in these mainstream conversations and to pique this interest, I do find it to be a positive takeaway from this rather than ignored. It's when you're ignored and so on that I do think you have a much deeper problem. So the fact that folks are at least seeking to understand and they do it in a number of ways that can border on peculiar or just outright offensive, it is still something where you can at least build a bridge on, would be my perspective.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, I mean, I do think it's interesting that someone built his term because it brings up other issues. It's easier to talk about identity, and it's easier for me as a journalist to pitch it to other outlets who might have never talked about it. Cesar, do you have any thoughts about this? You haven't in a while. I just want to make sure I get your takes on all this.
See,
I think you're on. You there? You're on mute.
The thing, one of the things, the Carla was saying, and in terms of like marketing to certain demographics, yeah, you if you want people to just like focus on the term Latinx, and you send it out there to like you send like a white net and to the whole Latinx community, you are going to get a negative reaction. And if you know about marketing, the first reactions are the ones that guide the conversation. Then people are just going to be focused on that instead of the product. So I get that to an extent. So how do we get, when it comes to social issues, when it came, even the African American community, when it comes to and the Latinx community, we have to, push against those things. Why do people feel a certain way about certain terms, about certain communities? Is anyone on the panel non-binary? You see? So this is like a panel of women on the LGBT or non-binary people speaking about their issues, and there's only one woman on board. So to me, I already have an issue with that. One of the things that I say is that if you have a panel and it's only one woman and four men, don't even invite me to it. You understand what I'm saying? Because they should have somebody else. It was already too late. If it's non-binary people, which are and trans people, which are the ones who want to be included within our community, I don't think anybody it's speaking for their community. We're speaking about them and being included with the community. I'll be upset if I were them. So, if they're the ones who are being persecuted, even within our communities, even within our community, women are being treated, the sexism within our community it's off the charts. Even though within the Dominican Republic, if I speak about that, Dominicans just go after me and try to go for my neck.
Mm-hmm.
The femicide here, it's insane. It's embarrassing. It's pretty high. It's one of like the fifth place, I think, in Latin America of the women getting killed out here. So it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty high when it comes to machismo, when it comes to homophobia, when it comes to, I think even the term and the concept of the gender of non-binary, not a lot of people know about it within our community. It's an alien concept to them. Why? Because we've been colonized by the Western world, right? Even the concept of gender being binary. We have indigenous people, the two spirits. The two spirits are not even, when it comes to gender, two genders. It's a Western concept from Europe. Even in Africa, even in tribes within Latin America, don't have this. Do we include them when we speak about the Latinx community? Do they matter? Do their voices matter when they say, I want to be included within the they don't like the term Hispanic. They hate Hispanic and Latinx. Not Latinx. They hate Latino.
Latino. They hate Latino.
They hate Latino. So I remember back in the days, I don't know if you remember, when we started out, right, within the digital space, we get people, even Chicanos as well. Even the Chicano community didn't even, Mexican American community didn't even like Chicano.
Yeah.
Even within, the professor was speaking about that earlier. If you speak a Hispano community, we don't use those terms in Latin America. When it comes to the general population, which is probably not more educated, if I'm in PR, nobody says Latino, nobody says Latinx. We say Dominicans. People in Puerto Rico say Puerto Ricans, Puerto Ricanos. You understand what I'm saying? Those terms, if you even want to call it, I think probably celebrities use it when it comes to people in the United States, but we don't use it in our countries. you know, not even Hispanic, that doesn't come up like that. But that's what from what I've seen.
Yeah. All right.
So-
You keep it real. Yeah, I know. I got you. So I'm sorry. I'm like tapping my screen, but
That's okay.
let me ask a couple of questions here. Yeah, because I'm like, I got to get the questions. This one is from Alex, because I do think this is an interesting question. So this from Alex Marin. In the absence of a unifying term, how does the panel see effective pan-Latin advocacy and policy taking place? And referring to African Americans before the Pan-African movement of the 60s and the 70s. Who wants to take that one? Anyone want to jump in on that?
I'll start with that because it's not a matter of the term, it's a matter of the issue at hand. Be it racism, be it injustice, be it educational opportunities, whatever it is, be it police brutality, whatever it is, those are the things that will bring a number of people together when there's a common sense of things to do for the justice or to right the wrong of whatever it may be. The fact that we use one particular term or another term will be circumstantial to the event. We're not going to agree. The same way that in my 40 years of academic work, which is older than many of you even at this age where you started, I was already teaching these things. When you were just beginning out of grade school, you're younger than what I've been, the years that I've been dealing with this in my teaching and my research and whatnot. That has not been resolved, and it wasn't resolved before I got to it when I started teaching, and it won't be resolved in my lifetime or yours. But what will be resolved is agreeing on common goals for justice, for education, for social equality, and a number of things. And as long as we don't polarize that because you use such a term, now you are my enemy and I will not talk to you. If we do that, if we polarize, we'll never agree on pan-ethnic, pan-Latino or Latina or Latinx, anything. We cannot polarize. We can say that given our circumstances, we will prefer a term, which is what I was telling my students many years ago. Oh, but professor, after all these things you've taught us about all the circumstances and the history and whatnot, what term shall I use to ask anybody? Ask what's their preference. What's your preference? Puerto Riqueño y se acabó. Boricua y se acabó. Nothing more to it than that. But if it's a collective group, what is my preference may be different from someone else's preference. What's the consensus? And that requires research and understanding and cultural reading, sensitivity, compassion, and no polarization of you are my enemy because you do not use X or Y term.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in here after you, Professor, because I don't think there is a lack of a unifying term. The unifying term has been Hispanic.
Carla.
Can you all hear me? The unifying term has been Hispanic for years in terms of policy and government conversations and public affairs. That has been the term. It has not been the preferred term, the all-inclusive, that we're including the Brazilians and we're including everybody. When it comes to policy and social justice, it should not be about the terminology. It should be about the issue. So if we are pushing the issue that will improve our lives behind whatever terminology, and we are achieving success and meeting goals and objectives and improving the lives of all of us, who cares what the term is? I don't care. If you are impacting people's lives for good, I don't care about the terminology. If in the future, 10 years from now, Hispanic won't be that unifying governmental term and it'll be Latinx, even better. Then it's gonna include even more people. But at that point, if you, because you don't see yourself identified in the terminology Hispanic, when someone is in Washington, D.C., trying to advocate for a better life for the Hispanic Latinx community, you are choosing to take yourself out of the real issue. and not supporting the real issue if it's about vocabulary.
Okay. And I'm going to continue. I just want to make sure we get more questions. I'm sorry. Apologies for the thumb on my camera. Let's see. There's so this one is Flores has a couple questions. But I think the one I want to use, so how do you identify the people that the issue is impacting? So how do you, this might be more for the two brand people on this panel. Danny, do you do research? Do you, how do you figure out terms, like especially with all the work that you're doing now or even previously? How do you begin to put some quant? I know Pew reached something that, the big headline was like only 5% of Latinos use the term Latinx, but when it got broken down by young people, it was over 20% and growing. We're aware of it. So what's the best way to begin to sort of segment, like create segments for this? I mean, to Cesar's point, I absolutely agree. This was a term, as with any term, that gets used for different reasons, and then all of a sudden it becomes commoditized and corporatized, and people are using it for which is what happens with language. So with that standing, I don't want to diminish that, but I also think there's some practical questions about how do you determine that segment then? So Danny, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's not exclusive to anything happening now. Data does kind of reign as supreme in this regard. The market research that goes into these types of things, because you have to understand your customer in order to really connect with them. So putting in the time, which unfortunately, depending on an enterprise, whatever the size is, they don't always have the resources for that. So they have to go and feed off of what they see in the media, and that's one way that things tend to just kind of reverberate, which could be negative or positive.
Skew. Yeah.
But when you do have the means, when you do have that market research, and when you're a data-driven, type of organization, you really do get into the grittiness. Cesar was talking about, indigenous, and talking about all these sub-levels and so on, which if you really spend time in this community, you'll find it's a rabbit hole. You will find folks that identify with variations that are not, connecting to others because of split origins and so on. I'm Cuban American. My wife is Venezuelan. Our children are what? It can get to that level of granularity. So the research piece at least helps guide the conversation. And then there's no solution on the table, in terms of when to use what. But the big thing is at least trying to narrow down, some of the demographic points that were put out in terms of generational or geographical and so on, and then trying to use that at least as a conversation starter. But it's also not a one-way conversation. You have to listen. You have to look at reaction. That's, paying attention to social listening. That's paying attention to reactions in press. Because if you don't see it as a conversation versus just a one-way, kind of a communication, you're already setting yourself up for failure. Because you're talking, you're basically telling them who you want them to be when you speak to them. That's just not the way it works.
Yeah, especially in this day and age, because it's so easy to just get destroyed with one tweet if you do it wrong.
Yeah, what I certainly do not want is any political group, left or right, to say this is the right term to reach out and get people to vote for us.
That's what's happening. That's my point from before. Right. Is that one of the reasons why you didn't vote for a Democratic president, because you had a Democratic Party that celebrated the use of Latinx, and we're not Latinx. Like, if I could share the comments, and Cesar could back me up, of the comments that I have seen in a post-2020 world of any time that term is used, you have people sharing information of like, that's not who I am, and it's the radical socialist like takeover of America, which gets to the politically charged term. I saw Gene had a comment about that in terms of like, why even use a politically charged term? So I just want to clarify that is already happening and right now in political circles, that people are saying, I'm not Latinx, I'm not voting. I'm telling you, it was a campaign strategy.
Well, let's find out who knew that that would be a turnoff for our people, and then started popularizing it, expanding it through their social media to make sure that our gente, wouldn't be mobilized to vote and combat that. Because once again, it's not in our control. Here's one thing that none of you would know unless I'm sharing it now. I knew the person who was in the room, one of the people who was in the room when the Census Bureau decided to use to standardize the Spanish speakers, the Latinos, the Mexicoamericanos, all of these different terms with Hispanic. And it was a consensus, not a consensus of the people. And one of those in the room was a UCLA professor, que en paz descanse, who shared that story with me as a consensus of the people in that room, all of them academics, none of them a political saying, oh, we're going to use this because the Republicans will gain more votes by using this general term. That was never the case, but that became popular myth, popular saying that that's why it was a Hispanic term that was created and imposed. We have to have control over two things. Number one, whichever term we prefer, we would use and not let it be in any other term be imposed on us, our culture, nuestra gente, in any form or fashion by anyone from outside of our culture. That's number one. And number two, not to polarize and become enemies on a simple issue of a terminology, because there are many more critical things to be upset about.
With you, but I'm telling you, it's happening. I mean, Cesar,
what the Texas Republicans are doing to repress the vote, what the Florida Republicans did to repress the vote, what the Georgians and the Arizonans, that is really what should get us all together, regardless of the term we use, to mobilize us to be more active and effective in government.
Can I say something about who?
Yeah, I'm just saying that it's used just so people understand. Let me just add this, and you can jump in, Cesar. The most viral opinion piece in USA Today 2 years ago says that Latinx was a tool of white liberals to tell Latinos that they're not Latino. And the person who wrote that then literally ran the Hispanic marketing campaign for the Trump administration, for the Trump candidacy, and it became a talking point. And I'm not picking sides here. I'm just telling you that it was an effective strategy. When people say like, well, why did so many Latinos vote for Trump? Do not discount the fact that it was the language police saying that that's being imposed by me. And I am not that person. Cesar, I mean, I don't want to but do you have any thoughts here? And we'll start wrapping this up. But
yeah, when it comes to terms like, even when speaking for the Latinx or Hispanic community, who gets to speak for us? It's mostly, even on this panel, we're mostly light skinned. I'm Afro Latino. I consider myself Afro Latino. And even with the indigenous community, they don't, like we were saying earlier, they don't even like the term Hispanic or Latino. They like to be called from, the country that they're from, or their whatever tribe they're descended from. Who gets to speak for them? Even in those, like you prefer, you were saying earlier, just because there were people in that room, that doesn't make you, the academics, the the ones that say this is what we're gonna be called, and that's it. You you guys got to call me, the Hispanic term. Even if the term Hispanic is an English term, even there's certain. I was thinking. I've been thinking about this. The whole terms that are being used right now by the Latinx community in Latin America, because English is sort of like the lingua franca of the entire world, right? Everyone is using English. The youth right now, how do you say Mars in Spanish? How do you say Bruno Mars in Spanish? The RS doesn't even exist. And kids say Mars. So that's not even, doesn't even exist in Spanish, right? There are a bunch of names even that we're borrowing right now from the English language. Gaslighting doesn't exist in Spanish. We use gaslight. Why can't we use Latinx? And you can't really say you both those in Spanish language when it's already a language of the colonizers that we've been, who fights for the indigenous people and the Afro people that were brought to the Americas, who fights for their right to say, call me by this, You know, we want to be like the masters of an ethnicity that doesn't even agree. Like you guys, you were all saying earlier, you know, what we say it goes. That's not the way it works. And if we want to make the world, it's not just how we market things to certain people. It's not just how our community is going to feel about certain people. Because if we don't make certain people uncomfortable, we're never going to move forward as a community. If we don't make our own community uncomfortable when it comes to gay issues, because we do have issues when it comes to homosexuality. We do have issues when it comes to women's issues. We do have xenophobia even within our communities. So if we don't challenge those, it's not just about, you know, even within the white community, when they're doing commercials, Nike and Kaepernick, for example, the white community went up in arms, even within people within our community. But Nike, it's way ahead when it comes to social issues and businesses. If you want to talk about data and stats, businesses do better when they have social issues attached to them. Even in Hollywood, if they have a diverse movie or show, a lot more people watch it. So you understand what I'm saying? There is, you are going to polarize people, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, if you want people to buy your product, they're not gonna care. First of all, if you calling them Latinx, the people that are exposed in social media are mostly young people. They're not gonna care if you calling them. There's gonna be a few people that are gonna be angry about it, right? And there are gonna be people who are being angry about the whole Hispanic thing. They're not gonna care even within. And why do people care so much? Why do they get so angry about the whole Latinx thing? Why don't you get more angry about how people are being treated within our communities that are marginalized, that are within intersections of being more marginalized? I'll be more worried about that than the term Latinx. And I do understand the significance of language. Language is important and it matters. And it's going to have to come at the expense of losing some customers. That's the way that I see it when it comes to marketing, right? If they're not, you're not going to lose them anyway. I think people are just saying that to guide the conversation online, especially people who are right wingers, like Julio, you were saying earlier, that a lot of right wingers are using that the Latinx thing to push against policies that most even Latinx people within the United States agree with, but they use it to derail the conversation, and then we focus on the damn term instead of how people are being treated themselves.
Precisely.
You know,
That's the
so
problem.
I do agree with that.
How much,
But language does matter. Language matters.
Yeah. How much time are we wasting
Yeah, but
debating the term instead of the policies? And it goes on and for years. Like so many people might still even go back and say the US population has usurped being Americano, because Americano is everybody from north to south. And why Americano when it was Cristobal Colon who got here first, and not Isabelo Vespucci or whoever it was who used the Americano because of the map drawings. It goes back decades and centuries in these debates that are useless, because our debate should be on the issues that are affecting how we live, our social justice, our income, our education, and our opportunities. That should be the debate, regardless of
right.
term we prefer.
Can I say, I don't think
Right,
anyone is
but
against how people are being
the
treated,
reality that
right? But I think language is the point. I don't think people are against, you know, within the gay community, unless you're asking the majority of Latinos, the Latinx people, and it's going. We have a culture that is very homophobic, that is very sexist, you know, that is against
True.
people, and we do have to. And how do we even combat those things? How do we start? Is speaking about it, and language is important. So we do have to speak about certain things. I'm not going to beat people overhead. I did write something that was very polemical, and I see that if I hadn't written that way, I do agree with the professor to an extent. You know, that I'm not going to be like, oh, if you don't use Latinx, you're a damn homophobe or you're sexist. But I did use those terms just to reach people, to have an impact. So if you don't use terms that are very, you know, solid, then people are not going to react to it. It's just going to be some people in the corner speaking about it, and nobody's going to be, you know, talking about it like we're doing right now.
I appreciate everyone here. I just make sure, Carla or Danny, if you have any final thoughts about takeaways or things that you guys want to add before we wrap up. I'm trying to get through the questions. A lot of questions are very similar. So unless there's a question that's like, oh my God, I need to ask this I just want to make sure we have final thoughts from Carla and Danny. If there's anything else that you want to add or react to.
I mean, I'm just going to say that we are not at a point where we are going to pick one term over the other. We're just not there. So do what works for you in whatever your sector of employment is. Do you in how you self-identify when you introduce yourself. Do you in accepting and not judging how others self-identify when they introduce themselves to you. Just embrace everybody. This is about inclusivity. This is about getting our community together, joining forces. We are stronger together. Let's push forward on the issues that matter and be happy. Do you. We live in America where you can be anything, where you can be anyone. So take advantage of that. And just, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna continue using the terms interchangeably. It works for me. It makes me feel good about embracing everybody and respecting everybody. And some, I know Jean's comment there that using Latinx doesn't mean we're respecting everybody. In the work that I do, I feel that it does.
Well, thanks.
Great.
Follow. So I'll just try to give a little bit of commentary, but to Caesar's point, when he mentioned about shows that have a diverse cast, that get watched more, using entertainment just as the vehicle for the comment, we are at a point where the diversity, conversation is at the forefront when you're assembling a story, when you're, looking for the storytellers that you want to work with and such. And that level of representation is an achievement, but there's still a lot more to do. And the monikers used, the terminology used to represent the different faces that you see up on that screen. To the professor's point, it's more important about the issue to see yourself up on that screen and identify with a story that speaks to you and your walk of life. Just as many other people have come before that were, they were prioritized because of the way they look, because of what their background is and so on. So we're at a point where at least there's a mix in the conversation. And I do agree, just really harboring on that one point about, what is the term that we use? I don't think that's the direction to go. The last thing I will say though is from the Latinx piece, the first time, to your first question, the first time I saw it, it was a capital X, which I was like very confused as to why that was. But the point when it was really discussed, it was about, inclusivity and representation. I do think that is a good point to be at. Whether we, the debacle over what the exact term should be, that certainly is not something that's going to get solved tonight. But at least the term is taking a wider lens in terms of, what this community is and who's a part of it. I think that might be something else that we should focus on in our conversation, to at least acknowledge we're going in a direction that at least is going to count everybody that's at the table.
Well, I think the big question that I have then, because of that, in terms of like being everyone at the table, and to Caesar's point, which I wholeheartedly agree, is to talk about the intentionality of that, right? To it's what you just said, Dan. It's like, if you're gonna push for like this diversity and being what you're, then you got to start with that intentionality in everything that you do. So how does that apply itself then to sort of being an advocate for that type of inclusivity? Because it feels to me like for people to walk away from this, it's like, Carla has her way of saying, this is what I do. I do all three and I'm good. I'm me, and like, get over it. Right. And like, and I'm going to keep being me and I'm not going to change. And I'm like, great, like, be you. Right. Because I do think we don't give ourselves enough in the community to elevate people who are like, hold on a second. This is what you're missing. It's what Cesar was saying. It's like this sort of challenging what we've had in front of us, right? Even on this panel or even anywhere. So I guess the question, when you have the professors like, we're having the same debate from 40, 50 years ago, I think it leads to itself, is that we're still an evolving community that still hasn't figured itself out. And we've all kind of been
Oh, no,
forced
but
to be together under
the community.
wait, let
has
me
figured
make my
it out.
point.
It's the language, it's the disagreement
I
of
don't
the
agree with that.
terminology, but not
I don't
that we
agree.
have to
I'm
separate ourselves out.
gonna push back. Hold on, Professor, just give me a second. I don't think we as a Latino community have figured ourselves out, and we have not. We've done ourselves a disservice in terms of this notion of pan Latinoism and everyone's in it together and we're unified. I think is a glossy marketing message that doesn't reflect reality when it comes to race, ethnicity, gender, and that we still have a lot of work to do. That's what I meant. So I think like it's important to celebrate unity, but understand that unity doesn't mean that there's, we're still hiding a lot of the problems that don't advance us, that make us feel underrepresented. And I guess my big takeaway is here is how do we as Latino professionals or Latina professionals begin to bring that intentionality to the world so that we're trying to change that message on that level of one-on-one, because I don't really think we'll ever have a unified, this pan-Latinism is kind of an illusion. Sorry, I dropped this one way too late in the session. So I don't know if anyone else had anything, but we have a couple minutes. I'm sorry, it just came out. Yeah.
Quick about this. I do agree with when it comes to Daniel and the professor and Carla as well with certain things. When it comes to the issues, right, there are more important, actions speak louder than words. It's a cliche, but it's true. It's true. It rings hollow when you speak about, when you have a brand speaking about Latinx, and then you see their board or you see their workers and they're like 2% Latinx people. That what's the point of you using Latinx? Just to it's just like window what is it, display, like you're showing us something, but behind the scenes,
window dressing, yeah, window shopping, window dressing.
Who's making the decisions? Who is a Latinx person actually getting paid to do this marketing, to us? And a lot of times it's not the truth, that's not the case. But I one of the things that Ray Perez that he commented in there, he says something about arguing terms. It's not really a waste of time, because it does focus on the issues, and the issues, like you guys were saying, if we don't speak about that, if language is not as important as action as well, then we're never going to get anywhere. So I do agree that we do have to speak about the term Latinx, and if people don't like it, or like Carla was saying and Professor was saying as well, then you don't have to use it. You don't have to use it, but you have to. I would suggest to people, why are you? Because there are some people. I'm not saying that this professor is, as those people are. There are people who are really, really angry about the term. They're even, why are you so angry about the term? Like, look within yourself. Why are you so upset with the term? Because it's not, if you're talking about destroying a language, the language is ever, it's not static, it's ever evolving. Like you guys, your professor was talking about earlier before. Why are you so upset about the term? What makes you so angry about it? That's what I want people to take away from that. Because I did see some people who's really, really angry, and the right wingers, like we were talking about earlier, Julio, that use that in a way to derail important conversations about our community, which they
they're imposing language on you.
And then
so
on the other side,
police.
and then on the other side, there are liberals, let's say like white liberals, who do use inclusive language. They're allies, but they're not true allies to our communities. They're just using this mask for us to believe these are our allies, and then they don't hire, they don't suggest, they don't recommend our people to work with them to give their input with our issues within our community and getting paid for it. That's how I see it, and I would like to see it not just within Latinx community, not just someone from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. I would like to see a diverse group of people, non-binary people from the gay community as well, dark-skinned indigenous people, and Afro-Latinos as well, Latinx people. That's how I see it.
Yeah, well, listen, we could go on as anything, it was a good topic to pick for the first one. I hope people enjoyed it. I enjoyed always conversing with each and every one of you, and I really appreciate each one of you for bringing it. And that to me is, for us, it's important to keep questioning it and just talking about it and having the history and having the practicality and having sort of the challenges. I really like the mix of this panel for that very same reason. because I think they make for great panels. So thank you all. Thank you for
I do
all
have to say
our
one thing.
participants' questions.
Julio.
Of
allow
course,
me-
Professor.
1 second.
Quick.
I remember early in this debate when one of my senior scholars, and we were talking about these issues, and he pointed out that there's so many different terms, Mexicano, Mexican American, and Chicano, whatever it is. And then someone asked him, what do you prefer? And says, any one of those that are not insulting, but say it with a smile.
That's a really nice way. I am so glad you added that, because that to me is exactly to Caesar's point of why are you so angry if someone uses a term that they want to self-identify with? Why does that make you so mad? So that is a really good way to end that, Professor. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, just say it with a smile. Start smiling a little bit, right? So I appreciate you all. You're all fantastic people. Thank you so much. Look all these people up. This is great. So say it with a smile. I'm going to leave it with that. Thank you, Professor, for sharing that incredible tidbit of wisdom. That should charge everyone up to enjoy the rest of their night. Thank you, Saul. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being on.
Gracias, Sonia, por la invitación.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here. We could be here forever, but Carla, I think we have our next panel, which is cancel culture. We can talk about
Okay, let's do it.
That's not controversial at all. So there you go.
Un placer.
Not at all.
Todos
Gracias
ustedes.
a todos. Hasta
Bye.
luego.
Thank you so much.
Gracias.
Chao, buenas noches.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Yes.